Dude, I have a challenge to myself, man. I gotta learn at least the basics of playing slide guitar before I turn 30s. Cause dang, that thing's so hard, dude. I can't play this. It's so complicated. I gotta get that.
Yeah, there's I played it forever and ever and ever. I think I first started off, I started doing it, but it just seemed at one point, there was like guys that did it all the time and always had the guitars tuned and the keys. And then I was like, I don't want to be carrying around extra guitars and different tunings. I don't want to be retuning during gigs. It's just, I just didn't want to do it. So then I started learning more standard tuning slide stuff. And then Warren Haynes started playing with the Allman Brothers, and he did his stuff in standard tuning. And I'm like, man, that sounds a lot like Dwayne, and he's in standard tuning. So then I started to kind of get into it again a little bit more and started doing it more at gigs. And then I heard Derek Trucks. I heard Derek early on because I knew some people kind of in the Allman Brothers circle that gave me a tape, said, you got to check out this kid. And I listened to it. I was like, what? And so that re-inspired me again. But then a couple of years, and then I got this record called Sacred, it was a CD called Sacred Steel. And it's basically where, Robert Randolph kind of comes out of that school, and Aubrey Gant and these guys. And that's where Derek got a lot of that kind of that gospel phrasing stuff. So if you can find that, it's called Sacred Steel. It's this compilation of these guys playing in these churches where instead of having like traditional, Hammond organ or whatever in these, Baptist churches, it was more lap steel and pedal steel guitar. So they're doing all those cool, like, all that really cool stuff, right? Makes sense. I started to listen to that and so on and so forth. So again, I couldn't understand why Derek's intonation was so good. I thought it must be because he plays a slide all the time, but of course his conventional playing is frightening as well. But and then I saw Jack Pearson down. I'd seen Jack Pearson with the Allman Brothers. Then I saw him at a little club down in Nashville. I actually took a lesson with him. I'm like, I got to figure out the mindset of someone who plays slide like that. So I got with him, and the one thing I really wanted to know, he's like, well, he did this thing where he would play something in standard, just like traditional fingering, and then he would repeat it right away with the slide to kind of get his intonation together. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So I started doing that, but it still didn't help for all those real kind of like pentatonic vocally, like, all that kind of stuff that you hear these, especially Derek do, and certainly, Robert Randolph and these guys. So one day I wanted to figure out one of those kind of East Indian tunes. I can't remember the name of the song, but Derek does. He does this medley. It was from his live record. And I actually wanted to figure it out because I was doing kind of some slide-ish things that weren't done with the slide. And so I started figuring out, and I was like, wait a minute. So then I grabbed the slide. And then what I figured out is I started just pressing down with the slide on the fretboard. And actually, just for a split second, so I would fret it and I'd get the intonation, then pop up again to do the vibrato and so on and so forth. But then I could do those faster runs by actually pressing down with the slide on the fingerboard. So then that like totally opened up for me. So it's like one of those things where you can play a line and then repeat it by actually pressing down with the slide just for a split second to check the intonation. And then when you add the vibrato, you do it over the fret. So then I started doing that. And then another buddy of mine, Rick Vito, is an unbelievable slide player. He does some of those cascading things as well, but he doesn't press down. And then I realized he did a thing where he kind of slid up first. Every time he would do one of those like faster, like descending pentatonic-y vocal type of things, he'd always slide up first. And for some reason and the centrifugal force or whatever it is of just going, hey, he was able to kind of control the intonation. So then I started messing around with that as well. And so now I don't fret as much with the slide because you got to be real careful because it can choke it out and kind of sound like it sounds weird. But it's cool to do it sometimes where you can hear the frets going by. And anyway, so it's been a long process, but those little things have really helped out. So it's fun for me to play sliding. And I do play in the different tunings, but most of all, I'll do it in standard. Sorry, we got off the train there.
No, that's totally, no, I mean, this is just me fangirling over you, man, because I mean, I saw the video and I was like, dang it, because you're a freaking master. But then playing slide guitar is definitely something that I've never got the discipline to learn. I took lessons, I mean, a quarter when I was at MI, but for me, it was always so hard, especially to do the vibrato. Like it's something, maybe, I don't know, maybe I got the wrong slide because my fingers are very, short. And to me, especially when I go after the 12th fret, I don't have any control. For me, it's just like it gets like totally like independent, and I'm like, ugh, this sounds horrible. Because I mean, we always speak in terms of intonation. We always want to sound like exactly on the right frequency. I mean, not sound out of tune. And then when I try to do that, the control is, for me, it's like it gets so tiring. And I don't know, maybe I just need to find the right one, and of course take more time. How often do you practice slide guitar?
It's not every day, but during the week, it's definitely a few times a week where I'll just go, it's slide time.
Gotcha. Yeah. So see, for me, it's like I grab a slide to mess around with probably like every 2 months, 3 months or something.
Yeah.
Especially when I see videos like yours, like something that you posted, and I'm like, dang it, I gotta practice this thing because I don't know crap about it. But anyway.
Well, I will say one thing that helped is I do use my third finger, and that's Dwayne Allman did. So I thought, well, Dwayne did it, but I noticed that if you use your pinky, you can definitely use your other fingers to do chording and whatnot. But the problem is that the pinky is always kind of going a little bit this way on the neck. You know what I mean? It's not perpendicular. Yeah. It's always going like that. And the third finger is always like just straight up. It's easier to keep it perpendicular, and it's easier to keep it evenly distributed over all the strings as opposed to being kind of bottom heavy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I find that has helped quite a bit. And you can still fret with the other fingers. That's one of the things I learned from Jack Pearson too, is that Jack, he would do he'd do West Montgomery octaves and stuff and play these chords while he had his slide on. I'm like, well, it can be done because he's doing it. So then that just motivated me to do it more. But it's one of those things where, I find that now, because I have these methods of kind of checking the intonation by pressing down with the slide. That's kind of a good way to kind of come out of the gate with the intonation. And actually, from doing that, it has bettered my intonation across the board. It was a real kind of a weird ear training exercise that once I got it into my ear, that it was easy to do those kind of faster but precise descending, pentatonic-y kind of vocal runs. It helped me both singing wise. It helped me with my other playing as well, because it kind of tightened things up. It was weird, but it worked. Which is
a last question before we go back. Do you change a guitar that has a higher action to practice a slide? Or
no, it's exactly the same.
Gotcha.
So
good to know.
But I like the lighter slides because then you don't press down as hard. And so therefore you're not going to bottom out as much. But the other thing too with slide is because I'm playing in standard tuning, I learned this right hand muting technique.
I noticed you did a thing you played with this finger and then you just kind of put this another finger kind of to cover the other strings.
So I have my ring finger on the let's see what I got here. Yeah, third finger on the high E string, middle finger on the B string, first finger on the G string, and then the thumb drapes over the bottom 3 strings.
Gotcha.
And I kind of keep that as the template. So when I pluck the B string, I'm using that middle finger and all the other strings are quiet. But when I do like faster stuff, I'll always kind of revert to the thumb and first finger, but then I'll just use my other fingers to keep all the other strings quiet. But then I always go back to that initial position. So it takes a little while to do. I was real lame at it at first, but once you do it, you can keep all these things quiet. You don't hear all the extra noise. And plus it just, as you well know, there's something about fingers on the strings that just sounds more emotive.
Totally.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yes. I was in the middle of I know what I was asking you. I was going to say that we were talking about the music business and so on and so forth. And the way I phrase, I always try not to sound like, jaded McCorkindale, because I'm not. I mean, I enjoy what I get to do, and I'm cool in the gang. But I think that there's a misnomer that a lot of people have, that the cream always rises to the top. And I always just go, well, sometimes it does, but it's not a rule. It's like sometimes it just has to be good enough. And then the rest of it is just, used by brute force and guile to put something over. But at the same token, every now and again, organically, some things go through that are truly extraordinary. And I would say you're definitely one of them. I mean, it's not about some other more, shall we say, shallow presentation or something. Not that there's anything wrong with that for somebody. I'm not saying that. But here's just a guy sitting down playing guitar, and it's amazing, which is really cool to see. Especially, so many things are in this day and age derivative, and that, again, it's all good. But yours was something where it was a really cool kind of a collection of all these different things, and it was just great music. You know what I mean? So, but one of the things I wanted to ask, as I'm thinking about this, is that there seems to be a lot of that kind of gospel-y chord chops in your thing. But not in a derivative sense, just in a very beautiful, because I love gospel chording and neo soul stuff and so on and so forth. I know, although it seems like somehow that's become kind of a taboo thing. People, another neo soul guitar player on Instagram, like whatever.
Totally.
But the stuff that you do is such an interesting spice of that stuff. And I'm wondering, where did that come from? Was there a bunch of different guys you listen to, or girls, or whatever the case may be? Who were your influences to get that kind of style going?
I think I'm like the most thankful for is Tori Kelly, which was the artist that I played my first gig in America. I mean, as a professional musician. And because when I joined Tori Kelly, I was a month after my graduation. So, and I don't remember like getting to know much about R&B and, to be honest, I didn't even know what neo soul was. Right. Like this Japanese magazine, they sent me an email and they're just like, oh yeah, we want to do an interview about neo soul style, and you were like a great example for that. And I'm like, wow, I'm sorry, but I didn't even know that I was considered a neo soul guitar player. That's fantastic. So, and then I start to Google and okay, so neo soul, okay, is there like those things. But Tori Kelly was a very important person to mention about this, because when I auditioned for her and then I got the gig, so she was saying like, oh, I kind of hear a lot of the John Mayer influence on your playing, but it would be nice because that's her saying, I'm very influenced by Lauryn Hill and D'Angelo. Mm-hmm. And it would be nice for you to start checking out this style, because again, we're talking about timing, and I grew up listening a lot of rock and Christian music, which you know how rock is. It's not something too much to mess around with the groove much. It's pretty much like, okay, you got to be tight, Right. And then when I with Tori, it was a lot of things, and I remember like Charles Streeter, which was her drummer at the time. He was always saying like, "Yo, just watch out a little bit about your timing, because if for this type of style, you kind of gotta be a little more like behind the beat. You gotta play more behind the beat." And for me, I had no clue what behind the beat would sound like. I was like, no, this felt wrong. Like, this doesn't sound good. And then he was like, no, try to understand, like, and then he was like, open your Pro Tools or your software and try to record and see, like, there's the bars over here. So you got to be a little bit like, the more behind that, like that means the behind the beat. So I remember like just trying to understand that concept. And so anyway, and so this is when I started listening a little bit more of the R&B, which is very influenced by the gospel, and playing with Tori Kelly was a lot of that. So I started searching and listening more of those music. So D'Angelo, Lauryn Hill, and everything would start making more sense. And then I then this Charles Streeter, the drummer, he was a very friend, and he was trying to help me out a lot. So he was like, and he's from Memphis, so he was mentioning a lot of the Memphis guys, the Tennessee guys. So he was like, "Yeah, man, you gotta check this guy out. This his name is Drew Boo."
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then he was like, "Yeah, check this guy." And then he mentioned about Eric Walls.
Eric Walls, yep.
And then I was like, "Oh, okay, so that makes sense." And then I was like, "Oh wow."
And Isaiah Sharkey's another one. He's
Isaiah, yeah, exactly. And then but those are like the first influences that I got, and I'm like, again, very thankful for being part of Tori Kelly's band, because this is how I got introduced to those things.
right.
And I was just like, okay, this is my homework time. So I started looking up to those things, start to understand a little bit of how it is. And yeah, but so I connected those things with what I learned in school, because I had this class called Jimi Hendrix rhythm guitar, which has a lot of those feels and, you know, all the stops kind of stuff. So, and that was a game changing to me. I was like, yeah, I want to play like Hendrix, because I forgot to mention about John Frusciante, but he was a big influence to me in the beginning. And John Frusciante, even though he's more like a riff creator, but he was like, I love the way how he used the feels in between, you know, very Hendrix influenced.
Right.
And
absolutely.
I was like, yeah, that's what I want. So anyway, so I kind of connected this two atmospheres and kind of put in that way. But again, I had no clue if like playing, because to me, I was like, whoa, why am I neo-soul? Is it because of my chord progressions? Is it because of my guitar tone? Because like to me, nothing of that made too much sense, you know? But then I started looking up and I was like, okay, so yeah, it kind of makes sense. So long story short, like I had no clue, but naturally things kind of got in a way that I was like, okay, cool. If people are categorizing me as a neo-soul guitar player, so wow, so that's what I am. But to me, well, I get the point. But yeah, so everything started around 2015 when I joined Tori Kelly's band, and then she started to introducing me to those elements. So
cool.